The meeting will come to order. Welcome to our May 8th first reading of the FY25 General Fund Budget. Our first agenda item is 1.01, Introduction. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank the individuals who've been involved in this process. First, to Dr. Royster, and to all of our employees who are involved in the budget process, including our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Robin Stack, our Director of Budget, Stephanie Thomas, Philip Davey, Deputy Superintendent, Jeff McCoy, Associate Superintendent for Academics, and Dr. George Ward, Associate Superintendent for Operations. Also, I know we have some members of their staff today that are here that have been active in this process. If you'll just please raise your hand and let us see who you are. We thank you. We thank you so much.
Someone apparently didn't even want to raise their hand.
We thank you so much, each and every one of you. We know this is quite an undertaking, and you've done an excellent job. And just please know that the Board of Trustees really appreciates your work very much. This meeting will serve as our first reading of the FY25 General Fund Budget. The next step in this process will be our public hearing and second reading of the FY25 General Fund Budget, which is scheduled for Monday, June the 3rd at 6:00 p.m. The administration would like to ask that the board request or sends questions to Nancy Fitzer by the end of the day on Wednesday, May 15th, in order to provide written responses before the second reading. Our second item on the agenda is item 1.02, the general fund budget process. Dr. Royster, would you be so kind as to review this process with the board?
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. So part of that review, we like to look at where we are, the things that have been accomplished through the budget. In general terms, the breakdown of where our budgeted dollars are expended and for what purposes. We also will talk a little bit about the process. As you all know, it's a very lengthy and complex process to get to this point. I will say on the outset, this has been one of the most difficult years that we have experienced in projecting revenue for, I think, a number of reasons. One is the change at the state level in how schools are funded, as you will recall, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that later. The Education Finance Act is still the statute that's on the books that governs the funding of schools. However, schools have not been funded in accordance with that statute for 2 years. They've been funded through a budget proviso, which is a one-year change in law related to the allocation of funds. With that, there have been a number of other state revenue changes. We've also seen pretty steady increase in mill value locally that, to a degree, defies past trends. It would appear that the pent-up demand for new vehicles is not yet being expended. We're still tracking fairly significant increase in vehicle tax. And that's, as you all know, that comes from the purchase of a new vehicle or the purchase of an additional vehicle. The way the taxing system is set up, the valuation of your current vehicle, in most circumstances, even with an increase in taxes, you pay less taxes on your car for the coming year than you paid in the previous year. So that's running counter to past trends. We're also seeing counter to past trends, although it's been predicted and projected several times in the last 4 years, a dip in the general economy. So that's made that a pretty challenging year. I've done this in this district, been part of it in this district and in a previous district for now 26 years. And other than 2 fairly significant recessionary periods, this has been the most difficult year to project revenue. Now, the upside of that is we have pretty positive revenue projections to share with you this morning, particularly regarding local revenue. But as I said, that was really, though less time consuming, much more complex and harder to project than actually going through the budgeted request and dealing with them. So let's start as we have and as we did in the work session. Where are we? Because where we are is directly related to what we spend and how we spend it. We're currently ranked 12th overall among school districts in South Carolina on an index of the 21 key measures that are comparable across all school districts. We were number 19 in 2012. Our students outperformed the state and the nation on the SAT and the ACT. Last year's graduates earned $154 million in scholarship offers. It's a pretty significant one-year return on investment. 24 of our seniors in 23-24 were named National Merit Scholarship semifinalists. 91% of our schools meet or exceed the criteria to ensure students meet the profile of the graduate. We're outperforming the state in ELA math and science for elementary and middle schools, and the percent of graduates who are considered college ready on the 23 state report card. Our grad rate's risen 13 points from 2012 to 85%, including a significant recalculation of the way grad rate is determined in the middle of that time frame. The graduation rate has increased 17 points among African American students, 13 points for Hispanic Latino students, 16 points for students with limited English proficiency, and 29 points for students with disabilities since 2012. We've moved from number 20 10 years ago to number 4 overall in district teacher pay. This board was the first in the state to approve a $40,000 starting salary for teachers, now at $47,738. Our turnover rate is 10% this past year, which reflects the year before. Less than the 13% state average and down from 12% internally the previous year. If you look at student success, as we continue to look at that, during the 22-23 school year, our students earned 10,442 industry certifications, a 19% increase over the previous year, and a 536% increase since 17-18. 1,423 of our students completed a work-based learning opportunity with 543 partner businesses and organizations, an increase of 14% over the previous year and 895% since 2018-19. In 22-23, our students earned 28,687 potential college credit hours via AP and dual credit courses, a 78% increase from 2016-17. All of this is predicated on our ability to attract and retain the highest quality personnel. Our teacher salary schedule currently has 12 steps above the state schedule, 100% locally funded. The top pay for our teachers with a PhD and maximum years of experience on the schedule is just over $100,000. 67% of our teachers have master's degree or higher. Our teachers have an average of 12 and a half years of experience. Our GATE, Greenville Alternative Teacher Education Program, successfully recruiting teachers in critical subject areas and expanding in this proposed budget 2 more subject areas. That program has an extremely high retention rate. Caring culture and environment, where we're providing a safe and healthy environment that promotes learning and respectful relationships. We have the long-term funding plan in place to maintain the best program investment. This district spent $1 billion in the decade starting about 2001, 2002, replacing and significantly renovating the facilities in this district, partially to meet growth, quite honestly, partially to address the fact that insufficient resources have been devoted for a number of years to the maintenance of facilities. If you don't pay in the near term, you end up paying more in the long term. The Long-Range Facilities Plan and Capital Improvement Program projects future district construction needs. We're currently maintaining 12.8 million square feet of space and 3,000 acres of grounds. We have a technology refresh plan that keeps school technology updated in a manner, the 4-year refresh cycle, such that our devices remain under warranty during that period of time, avoiding significant repair costs to maintain technology equipment. We provide, again, a safe environment. We have full-time school resource officers every middle and high school and at an increasing number of elementary schools. Zone patrol officers visit all remaining schools and centers multiple times each day. We have school counselors and mental health counselors that serve Greenville County School students in every school. 5 security specialists ensure compliance with security best practices, update emergency plans, conduct trainings, and ensure behavior threat assessment matrix teams are in place at every location. Law enforcement officers and technicians travel with each of our 6 portable evolved weapons detection systems throughout the school day and at entry to athletic and other events. Resource stewardship. We want to ensure that we're efficiently using resources through effective management and development. Finance Department has received the best possible unmodified audit opinion on the external audit of the annual comprehensive financial report. We have the highest credit ratings possible for a school district in South Carolina. A1 plus from Standard & Poor's, AA1 from Moody's. We have a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Government Financial Officers Association for 37 consecutive years. The U.S. Department of Energy has recognized us as best in class in the following categories: HVAC inspection and maintenance for indoor air quality, efficient HVAC for indoor environmental quality. We maintain the lowest per pupil administrative cost of any school district in the state of South Carolina, spending less than a cent of every dollar for that purpose for district leadership. Our budgeted utility cost has remained stable from 2008 to 2024 through increased measures of energy efficiency. One very significant item that you all have approved in your capital budget, and most recently, the use of fund balance to complete the project, is LED lighting replacement. We have become more and more energy efficient throughout that entire time period. And anybody that's experienced paying a utility bill for their residents knows utility costs have not decreased during that period of time. There have been numerous rate increases. We want to make sure that we're generating communication out to and with our communities. We've had 29 million visitors to the GCS website. 60% of our Facebook posts reach 10,000 or more people, 20,000 Twitter X followers, and 27,000 Instagram followers. We believe in recognizing the significant contributions of our employees through Teacher of the Year, Employees of the Year, Employee Spotlight, retirement events, and other programs to again recognize and express our appreciation to the hard work of the nearly 12,000 people employed in the school district. Our Upbeat survey indicates principals are 96% satisfied with the communication supports provided to their schools by the district. We provide ongoing assistance with parent and staff messages for written and audio channels, English and Spanish. Our website is continually monitored and improved to ensure ADA compliance. We have an ongoing program of media relations to share positive news stories. Let's talk a little bit now about where we spend the general fund. So if you look at the general fund from FY24, salaries and benefits right at $796 million. All other expenditures, just over 68 million. We are a people-intensive organization. Every effort we have is focused on people, the students in our classrooms, done for people, with people, and by people. If you look more specifically at where those people serve, it's a little hard to see up there on the screen, but if you look from left to right, you'll see the largest amount, $509 million, teachers and aides. Instructional support, $96.9 million, 11.2%. Operations at the school level, operations personnel at the school level, $71.3 million. School administrators, principals, assistant principals, AAs, $45.8 million, 5.7%. School level clerical, 2.4%. District employees, that's everybody who is not assigned to a school. So you think about maintenance workers, people sitting in this room, the people helping employees with their benefits, ensuring they're paid on time, processing their employment or their retirement or their separation papers. All the various aspects of operating what, if we were a city on a day of school attendance, would be the 5th largest city in South Carolina, with a population density that I think would rival New York City, based on the number of people inside that 5 million square feet. If you look at the final category, which are district director and above, that's the leadership of this school district. $9.3 million, 1.3% of the salary budget. Again, less than 1% of the budget. There you will see listed by position the individuals that fall within each category. Now, if you turn your attention to non-salary budgeted expenditures, you will see the largest amount of that is fixed cost. Utilities, liability tort insurance, annual software maintenance contracts, cellular wireless fees. The next largest amount is maintenance support, which are purchase services, supplies and equipment for maintenance, building services, grounds, athletic fields, and security. All the others are far lesser in amounts. The third amount would be instruction, which would be purchase services, supplies, equipment, and dues for instructional functions, media services, pupil activities, curriculum development, and school administration. There you see each one of them listed in detail what that represents, all of which are necessary to support what goes on in the classroom on a daily basis. And we talked a little bit about where we stand academically, how our students are performing, the results of the significant investment that this community makes in their 13, in some cases 14 years, if they started with us in pre-K or earlier, years with us. So some of the other things that have occurred in that 10 to 12 year frame of time that contribute directly, and in some cases indirectly, to those gains in student achievement and attainment. We've added 10 steps to the salary schedule, ensuring that our most experienced and veteran teachers receive a step increase in those years, in addition to some simple cost of living increase applied to the last step on the salary schedule. We have increased from number 20 to number 4 in all categories of teacher pay. In that period of time, moving from number 20 to number 4, our starting pay went from $33,259 to our current starting pay of $47,738. We've reduced the student-teacher ratio across all grades with a strategic focus in first grade. We've increased academic and athletic supplements, increased bus driver's salary, including having increased starting pay in that period of time by 62.7%. Because we compete in an environment that is right now highly competitive for individuals who hold a commercial driver's license. We've ensured elementary daily teacher planning time, and our alternative teaching education program has increased 600% in the first 6 years. We've been able to provide a full-time athletic director at every high school. And in that same 10 years, we've seen tremendous growth in athletic programs. Athletic fields and grounds maintenance is funded and performed at the district level. Previously, that was left up to the responsibility to both fund and perform at each individual school. Developed a flex allocation that allow principals to make a choice between an FTE or an expenditure for another purpose directly related to instructional needs at their school and in their community. We've implemented an employee assistance program, opened 5 new schools and centers, increased student capacity at 9 other locations, and added 14 weight multipurpose rooms. We maintained teachers when state funding ended for reduced class size and gifted programs. We maintained teachers and aides when state funding ended for English as a second language, now categorized as multilingual learners, teachers. We decreased the multilingual learner student-teacher ratio from 138 to 1 to 80 to 1. We established elementary reading interventionist positions and expanded them to meet data-driven needs. We relocated special education classes to home-based schools, added ongoing funding for band and strings instruments, provided additional assistant director supplements for instrumental music based on the number of participants, added assistant coaching supplements to multiple sports to provide competitive balance with athletic programs in other districts, decreased the school counselor ratio at middle and high schools from 350 to 1 to 250 to 1, and decreased the elementary school counselor ratios. We increased by a base of 1 clerical support for all schools. Initiated a security zone patrol, targeted increases for particular employee work groups with critical shortages, primarily those work groups in our lowest bands on our pay schedules. Added interventionists, before and after school tutoring, credit recovery labs, extended summer school, and more to mitigate pandemic learning gaps. Added evolved systems and personnel to operate. Expanded the ARMS program to 2 sites and increased program enrollment by 83% in 2 years, adding 190 students in grades 3 to 8. Now, as we mentioned at the outset, we receive a significant amount of our funding from state sources. And this is a description of the new state aid to classrooms funding model. As you recall, at the outset of my comments, I mentioned to you that the Education Finance Act is still the statute on the books to fund schools. However, they've been funded through this budget proviso for 2 years. It attempts to fund education based on a statewide average student-teacher ratio. It includes those people that are listed there in the smaller print. It does not include principals, assistant principals, clerks, custodians, maintenance employees, or any other worker outside of those listed in the proviso, with one exception: bus drivers, for which the state is currently providing about $12 an hour, I believe, with their latest proposed increase. I believe you'll recall we pay almost double that for an entry-level driver and still struggle to retain and recruit sufficient number of drivers. The student-teacher ratio used in the FY25 Senate budget is 11.2 to 1 statewide. Interestingly enough, that's the same ratio used over the previous 2 fiscal years. So apparently exactly the same number of people in those positions were employed in exactly the same ratio for 3 straight years now. The average daily membership of a school district is divided by the 11.2 to 1 student-teacher ratio, which determines the number of classrooms the state will fund. The average cost of a teacher plus fringe for fiscal year 25 is $75,891. The average cost in our budget for our own teachers is $91,900, Stephanie? But that's the average cost calculated by the state, statewide. That salary is based on a teacher having a master's degree and 12 years of experience on the statewide minimum salary schedule, which explains the difference. Because our average teacher is almost dead on that level of degree and years of experience. I believe we're at 12.5. Weightings determine each district's share of total funding. So the formula is based on this theoretical 75%, 25% share. 75% state, 25% local. However, each district receives its share of the state funds based on its proportion of total weighted pupils. In a minute we'll look at more closely at that. And the district's ability to pay as measured by the index of tax-paying ability. In other words, the State Department of Revenue looks at the assessed value of property in our county and determines, in our county and in every other school district in this state, by formula, your ability to pay. The current ratio for Greenville County Schools is 77:23. Here are the weightings. If you're a student in K-12, not subject to any of the following add-ons, your value is 1.0. If you are pre-career or career in technology, under EFA, your value would be 1.29. Under this new formula, 1.2. Before we leave career and technical, as a reminder, a student in career and technical courses in our district is on average the second most expensive student in the system to educate. The most expensive student to educate are those students for whom we need to provide special education services or supports. The weighting for that was 1.74 to 2.57 under EFA. There is some improvement to that under state aid to classrooms. In all are weighted at 2.6. Gifted and talented was at 0.15, it remains at that. Academic assistance, 0.15, remains at that. Limited English proficiency was at 0.2, remains at that. Pupils in poverty, some improvement to that. It was at 0.2, it is now weighted at 0.5. Unfortunately, in the next one, dual enrollment was weighted at 0.15. In an area we have seen tremendous increase within our system. It's weighted at a 0 add. So if you look at a comparison, gave you the example of our average teacher for budget purposes. All right, this is our sitting average. All right, the state 55,104, master's plus 12 years experience. In our district, that person earns $60,762. The state proposes a 2146 increase to the 55,104, bringing it to 57,250 with a fringe cost of 18,641, a total of 75,891. Our district, salary 60,762 with a $2,700 proposed increase. The proposed salary combined is 63,469. The fringe on that is 20,665 because all fringe except medical, which is a static number based on the plan, all the rest of the fringe costs are percentages of total salary, bringing our total average to 84,134, creating a difference of 8,243. The state has 28 steps. We have 36. We're 8 steps above. We have 6,073 employees paid on the teacher salary schedule. And again, as a reminder, these are the only ones that are included. And the second asterisk under state funding based only on gives you some idea of the people that aren't included. As if you could operate a school without a principal or custodians or secretary. So as you look at your recommended budget for first reading, you will notice some slight change from the workshop presentation. That occurs every year. Now, before we look at those specifically, as a reminder, we don't have a slide about this, but you all have been through the budget process before. For our purposes, we begin November, December, generally speaking, the first part of December, going through and entertaining all the requests from every department, location within the district. We examine each department budget, examine the allocation formulas. About every third year, we go all the way back to zero with them, but every year, the finance group, along with the deputy superintendent and the chief officers, look at all the departmental budgets. They look at all the requests. If, Stephanie, would you hold up those two books? Those are the requests and the information that they go through. All right, so there's no way to do all that, right? You can just tell by looking at that, there's no way to do all that. There is nothing in there that is out of order. There's nothing in there that's not a positive thing for advancing some aspect of the district. But obviously we can't do all that. That takes a considerable amount of time leading up to coming to the final budget group, which is basically the senior leadership of the district. That's all the chief officers, as well as the deputy superintendent, the associates for academics and the associates for operations, senior people from finance, and me. We go through what becomes the information that's presented to you in the workshop and further refine that throughout the process, looking at requested expenditures, looking at revenue estimates. In an ever-changing environment, I think I described to you during the workshop setting that the day or so before that, Julie monitors the legislature when they're in session constantly. But I happened to be watching, she was as well, a back and forth on the Senate side in finance. And in an hour's time, we lost 2 million, picked up 800,000, gained back the difference between the 2 million and the 800,000, then lost another 1.2 million. It shifted within that hour, all the way back to, at the end of the hour, it was back where it started the hour. So that's one of the reasons it's difficult to track this. The number you have today was based on the Senate version that was sent to the conference committee. So we have the two ends. And this time, the Senate version is a little bit less than the House version. for probably 18 of the preceding 20 years, the opposite would have been true. Not been true, I guess, this year and the last year. So we go through all that process, making sure we've heard and considered everything, and then we look at the other factors related to revenue projection. Those things being, what does appear to be the general economic trend? For example, right before we sent out the information that you received this past week, two things occurred. The Fed decided not to change interest rates, which obviously affects economic patterns nationally, which ultimately affect us. The other thing that happened is, though the BEA, which is the group that gives economic advice and data regarding tax revenues to the legislature, though they have not publicly said this, they've not officially presented that, it is our understanding the revenue report they're going to deliver is more positive than the one they had before, which is an indicator there'd not be a reduction. So we continue to get those updates and information. It also, between the workshop and now, provides time for finance, Robin and her staff, to look at all the income and local revenues so that we're basing it on a continuing pattern. And this time we went back and looked at a millage increase and or decrease pattern. We went back 13 years, and more particularly went back the past 5, but we went back all the way back 13 years before we settled on what we believe is the most accurate revenue projection. Because we want to make sure that we always provide the board with a balanced budget. In this case, it includes a recommended conservative tax increase, but that also we're projecting that in a way that at the end of the fiscal year, we try to end inside 98% expended. If we're expending significantly less than 98%, then we've inaccurately projected. And if it were to ask for a tax increase, we'd be asking for a little more than we'd need to ask for. Or if it weren't a year of any kind of increase, there might be things we could have included that we didn't include. On the other hand, we do not want to be expending more than 98% if we can at all avoid it. Because you talk about getting inside 1% in a budget our size with as many people who can be expending dollars in accordance with their budget, we could go into red, which would have an extreme adverse effect on our bond rating and would certainly not be something that'd be recognized as sound fiscal financial management. Now, the last 3 years have been very different. We had that infusion of ESSER funding. We used that to replace general fund expenditures, which generated a fund balance far above what ordinary circumstances would generate, which should be an amount between 1% and 2%. So we're trying to hit that 1% to 2%. So this is the first time in 2 to 3 years we had to be as precise as we would have been before ESSER, because we knew we had that ESSER that was going to generate all this exceptional fund balance. That ends when the books are audited June 30th for this year. There is no ESSER funding going into next year. It'll all be expended. The audit report you will get in the fall will show a fund balance that reflects more than 2% of the general fund budget, but it's because of that final year of infusion of ESSER dollars. So in this budget, we have proposed a $2,700 increase to each cell on the teacher salary schedule. That's a little higher than what we shared with you at workshop. We also have included in there, you have a table showing that, what that impact is on our salary schedule. We also have additional information regarding, as best we can determine from other school districts, sometimes they may hedge a little bit on the number they share. Their budgets aren't finalized either. There is a significant number of school districts. Stephanie, how many? Over 50,000? 20, 23, 25 that have shared that they intend to try to get their salary over 50,000. The highest one, I believe, being Charleston at trying to reach $55,000. They're currently ahead of us now. Step for every teacher and adding that 36 salary step so that those sitting now at 35 would get an added 36, valued at $2,500. Entry-level teacher salary of $50,503, which solely based on the numbers we've seen so far should keep us in the top 5, we believe. Now, who knows what might change in some of those places in the next few weeks. It proposes that the lowest wage, hourly wage on our salary schedule move from $15.06 to $16.08. For all of our other employees that are paid on step schedules, none of which have the number of steps the teacher schedules have. I think the highest one has 14. A step increase for those employees, which would be a minimum of 3.5%. Some of those steps are a little higher than that. Some of them are lower than that, but proposing it that way ensures that all of our other employees get at least a 3.5% raise. 3.5% raise for all employees not eligible for a step. So if you've been working here 15 years in a category where there's 14 steps, and this is your 15th year, you would get a 3.5% raise. A 5% increase for school registered nurses. We made a higher than average for all employees recommendation to you all last year, which you approved. It increased our retention rate for nurses, so we recommend a slightly additional increase for that employee work group this year. There still remains slightly under the teacher salary schedule, but more competitive wage. Obviously, funding for student growth, we continue to grow. We have a small group remaining. There was some internal inequity going back 2 years when we didn't give non-teaching employees step raises, they just got a flat percentage. This cleans out that last group, the ones that were furthest behind that were advanced first. This is the last group that has the least distance to go. Funding to meet the required employer contribution for health insurance. I believe that's about 10% for the starting January. Plus, we got to pay the second half of the increase they passed last year. The first half was budgeted in the budget we're in this year. We have to budget for the second half, next year's budget. The next one, the item we heard strongly from principals and from teachers. If we don't have enough substitutes, that means teachers have to cover classes. So to maintain the permanent substitute teachers that we were able to put in place with ESSER funding, we had a few before the pandemic. This maintains one at every school. That person shows up every day and they're put in the first absence of the day. Tools for teacher hiring and retention. There's for example, a piece of software, fairly low significance in cost to the general fund budget, but facilitates for teachers the use of AI to assist them in many of the routine tasks they have to perform, saving them time. Continued expansion of the GATE program to help us to ensure we can recruit enough qualified teachers to serve our students. Funding for school safety and security. Increased resources for students with disabilities and multilingual learners. Additional intervention teachers, taking the formula we used prior to the pandemic and slightly adjusting that formula to ensure we have an interventionist at every school and the ability to add at schools that are more impacted by lower reading achievement through other funds, additional interventionists. For the second year, Prisma has informed us they will no longer pay 100% of the cost of athletic trainers for the 25 that their contract calls for them to provide. Last year, they informed us it would be $150,000. This year, they have added another $150,000 to that charge to us for those persons. Still far less than we would pay if we had to engage them in our own employ. And then something that's new, and we've tried to do things incrementally to make some improvements, and you saw a number of those listed earlier, some of the accomplishments that have occurred in the last decade. To provide a base level of funding to support school-level student activities, a formula-driven allocation tempered by the poverty level of the school, recognizing that some communities have more resources to be able to raise funds locally than others do, to help meet the ever-increasing cost of offering student activities. Now, we have adjusted that dollar amount down slightly from what we presented at the workshop. School-level instructional materials supply increase to offset inflation. Arts and athletic supplements, athletic support funds. Summer school, because we've not had to fund that since prior to the pandemic. Fountain Inn High School, final grade level added. That's a zero cost, but we gained the teachers for that. I believe it's 26 plus teachers by reductions at other high schools throughout the district. We graduated a larger class, the high school level, than the entering class at the high school level. But we still have teachers for growth at various levels. Some personnel for new elementary school opening in August of 25. Maintaining 2 bilingual attendance supervisors that were funded at the ESSER. Recognition of additional square footage in the last several years. It's been, I believe, 9 years since we've added any carpenters. It's proposed to add 2.0 FTEs. Our custodians are assigned to schools on an allocation formula. There are school additions that are coming online that adds the 5.5 call for in the formula. We've greatly expanded and enhanced fire, burglar alarm systems, security systems, adding a technician to bring that more in line with the number of systems we operate and more in line with the other tradespeople that support and service systems. An ETS system specialist to help them with the backlog of work that they're experiencing. Academic, operational, and business increases to offset inflation. Preventive maintenance funding for grounds and maintenance primarily related to trying to address the issue we have with the significant wear on turf on fields that serve football, soccer, and lacrosse. In some cases, they're serving 13 teams in those fields. Replacing our software for energy management because that software has ceased to be available to us, district technology contracts, and purchasing software that so we can digitize our procurement system instead of having so much paper passing back and forth. Greater efficiency, greater speed. There are 3 reductions. The movement of Langston Charter Middle School to one of the charter school districts, the closing and relocating of the 4K classes at Overbrook Child Development Center, and the moving of the early college program to Southside, Carolina, and Berea, and closing down the standalone early college program physically housed at University Center at what used to be McAllister Square. I did mention to you 3.8 mil tax increase. This is the impact. As you know, each year we look at, because there's most significant impact to our local residents are the taxes on their vehicles. So we every year take the 3 most popular cars in America and the average age of a car in America, and we run an impact based on those vehicles. Well, despite the fact that people are buying all these new cars locally, the average age of a vehicle in the United States has gone up by 1 year. The average car owned, or truck, because F-150 is one of the three most popular. But for this example, 2011 Toyota Camry. In 2023, you paid $19.20 on that. In 2024, this year, you paid $18.80 on that. The proposed 3.8 mil increase included in the administration's recommendation, you would pay on that car $18.30, so 50 cents less than you paid this year. Just as a reminder, because it's amazing how many people just simply don't know this, because your home is still listed on your tax bill as if you were paying taxes to the school district's general fund, their owner-occupied home. So if you own it, or like most of us, you and the bank own it, this is how much you paid in 23, zero. This is how much you paid in 24, zero. And this is how much you pay in 25 with a 3.8 mil increase, zero. You pay no taxes to the school district's general operating fund on an owner-occupied home. You pay it on a second home. You pay it on the owner of rental property, pays tax on the rental property. Small businesses pay property tax. Most large businesses and industries, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, have a fee in lieu negotiated instead of a tax. So the millage increase doesn't apply to them. That fee in lieu is set. It was agreed to some number of years ago. So if you are a small business, say you bought a piece of equipment. So you pay on your property, your building, pay on equipment. And there's no way to really run this because everybody's business is a little different. But if you buy equipment in your business, you can depreciate that equipment. That is, you can reduce its value. All right, so one way you can do is you can depreciate all the value in 1 year. You could depreciate it in 2 years if it has a useful life of 5. So in 2 years, you zeroed it out. You zero out the tax you pay on that. All right, so a building. Now, if you buy a building, unless you're one of those people that's got a fee in lieu of negotiated, or you're in a multi-county park, or you're in some other agreed upon local deal that does not require nor allow for the school board to approve or disapprove of. If you're not in one of those arrangements and you purchase an office building for $500,000, you could depreciate it out for 39 years using that depreciation method. Now you're going to pay property taxes, but what that does is depreciate, giving you reduction on your income tax side for owning a depreciating asset. I believe you can depreciate it in less than 39 years. Isn't that right, Robin? You can depreciate it now inside 10 all the way down to 5. So this is not as solid an example as the cars, because some of this depends on how much money you're taking in revenue, what your tax picture looks like on the revenue side. But it's just to say it's not a straight, really straight impact across any group of people who pay towards the general fund. In summary, this budget recommendation recognizes the importance of teaching and non-teaching employees through pay raises to maintain our competitive status. It meets every mandate we're required to meet. It addresses growth in student numbers. It maintains all current staffing levels and provides improvements to special ed and multilingual populations. It provides adjustments for inflation in services and supplies. And really as a related note on that, I believe inflation is sitting right now at 4%, and our proposed raise for employees is 3.5. It enhances student and employee safety and security, and it does include a very small number of ESSER-funded items that we believe are critical to continued student success and continuity. Primarily those interventionists, the permanent substitute positions, the bilingual attendance supervisors. This is simply a reiteration here of the process that we go through that I mentioned to you at the outset. And now I believe, Ms. Stack, it's to you.
Thank you, Dr. Royster, and good morning, everybody. We do have some changes to the revenue section, and let's start on page 3, where we're going to look at local revenue changes. The first one is property tax. Based on the review of current property tax revenue through March of 2024 and the revision of the FY24 projected mill value, the administration projects an increase of $11,192,000 when compared to the information presented at the board work session. That's an 8.5% increase over the prior year mill value, budgeted mill value. The next section is Act 388 millage. The South Carolina Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office, in accordance with state law, calculates the millage increase necessary to address escalations in operational costs resulting from inflation and county population growth. Based on this calculation, millage should be increased by 10.2 mills. The administration is proposing an operational millage increase of 3.8 mills for FY25 in order to meet the needs associated with growth and inflation. This $6,848,000 increase will use 3.8 mills of the 25.3 carryover mills. That's a 0.2 from FY22 and 3.6 mills from FY23. On page 4, we look at changes to state revenue. The state aid to classrooms category. The Senate Finance Committee legislation for state aid to classroom uses a lower average teacher salary, a student-teacher ratio of 11.2 to 1, and removes funding for employee health insurance out of the allocation formula. The changes decrease this state funding source by $11,586,000 when compared to what was presented at the board work session. The next item, health insurance, is new. Funding for employee health insurance was previously included in the state aid to classroom allocation. In the Senate version, the amount is listed as a separate line item, so this allocation is provided to assist with the increased cost of health insurance of $9,285,000. Retiree insurance, this category, the Senate's Finance Committee legislation increased it by $270,000 from the information that was presented at work session. Other state revenue category. In 2022, the General Assembly adopted a method to reduce the property tax paid on all manufacturing property except property subject to a negotiated FELO. The reduction is accompanied by obligation on part of the state to reimburse local governments for lost property tax revenue. resulting from this implementation. Based on FY23 and FY24 amounts received, the projected miscellaneous state revenue category is being increased by $2.7 million. And the final change for revenue is in the transfers area. The revenue projection for the transfer from food service through indirect cost has increased by $146,000 for FY25. That concludes the changes in revenue.
Morning. Expenditures begin on page 5. Page 5 is a summary of all of the proposed expenditures, giving you totals, and I just want to make you guys aware, the blue coloring is there on purpose. So if the number changed to blue, that's because there were teacher salaries included in that projection, so that's for the change from the 2,500 to the 2,700. If the entire item is blue, that means there has been a change to the entire item, and we will go over that change with you. So just to briefly go over everything, starting on page 6. As a reminder, the expenditures are separated into two groups, state mandates and local priorities, to meet the strategic education plan goals. And the first items are state mandates that fall under Goal 2, Premier Workforce. Teacher salary step of $6,928,000 covers the state mandated salary increases for teachers based on their experience for fiscal 2025. It includes any local components that Greenville County Schools has included in salary schedule to attract and retain teachers, ensuring competitiveness for recruitment and retention of educators. The teacher certificate upgrades. Our salary, as a reminder, has 5 different certificate levels: bachelor, bachelor plus 18, master's, master's plus 30, and doctorate. Our teachers are both required and encouraged to pursue additional training. When that training results in a certificate upgrade, that pay increase is mandated. The next 2 items are related to employer health insurance premiums, which, as you recall, are calendar-based. The first item is for the second half of calendar 2024's 3.7% increase. Second is the first half of calendar 2025's 11.8% increase. Together, these items total $6.3 million.
At the top of page 7, we'll begin the priorities to meet the requirements of the strategic ed plan. Under goal 1, student success, the very first item there is increases associated with student growth. This number just changed very slightly, I think up about $4,000, just based on the difference in teacher salary calculated by budget there. That is for the additional 500 students projected for our planning and demographics team. Also, you'll see Dr. Royster mentioned earlier the 26.75 FTEs for Fountain Inn High School. As you all know, we're adding grade 12 this coming fall, so that item takes care of the general ed teachers, the special education teachers, the paraprofessionals, assistant principals, school counselors, media specialists, and clerical staff required. And as Dr. Oyster already mentioned, that number is zeroed out there because it is being taken care of by positions that are being transferred from allocations at other schools.
The intervention teachers, as we mentioned last reading, this will add 24.5 interventionists to the existing 35 already in general fund to allow our elementary schools to have a base of 1.0 reading interventionists and or literacy specialists to serve those students who are still struggling to read on grade level. Our teachers for multilingual learners, the 81:1 ratio is the ratio the board approved several years ago. 9.15 additional FTEs are going to be required to maintain that 80:1 ratio. Last year, the board approved the 50:1 ratio for multilingual learners for those schools whose population's over 50% ML. So again, this 9.65 FTEs will help us maintain that ratio for those schools who meet that criteria. The Comprehensive Literacy Intervention Program, this is Read 180 that we use in the middle schools. We've used that for several years. In the middle schools, some of that coming out of ESSER funding as well. It is one of the stronger programs, reading programs for middle school, as evidenced by the Evidence for Every Student Succeeds Act, the ESSER rating which we use to evaluate our programs. Our interpretation services for multilinguals, again, this is an increase. We're already using this service. This just increases the dollar amount so that our teachers and administrators and staff can continue to talk and communicate with our families who may not speak the English language, but allows them to interpret so that they can still stay in communication.
As Dr. Royster mentioned, Greenville County Schools utilized ESSER funds to increase the number of full-time permanent substitute teachers in our schools, with 16 currently funded through the general fund. An additional 75 FTE are required to provide each school with a 1.0 FTE. This item is $3,120,000.
The 3.0 special education teachers will fund 1 teacher and 2 classroom assistants for 1 preschool self-contained classroom, which will increase our total classrooms from 29 to 30, with 1 of our preschool itinerant teacher remaining. Behavior specialists support Tier 2 and Tier 3 behavior support needs by proactively assisting teachers with whole class and individual behavior management. They help teachers write BIT plans, behavior intervention plans, and provide support for implementing those behavior intervention plans. These 2 additional specialists, by hiring them, the workload per specialist will be reduced to approximately 10 sites each, which will allow the employees to spend more of their time on proactive behavior rather than reactive support. The 1.0 psychologists, school psychologists, will increase the staffing to allow our psychologists to offer support such as counseling, skill building, conflict resolution, and social skills, and lead in the crisis care and behavior and threat assessment, the BTAMs that you are familiar with, in order to enhance school safety. Our Greenville Alternative Gate Education Program, this will expand to accommodate 120 participants with 6 additional areas of certification to include band, orchestra, choral music, art, drama, and dance. This increase includes participation costs, coaches, materials, seminars, substitutes while visiting master teacher classrooms, as well as mentor stipends and hourly support for the peak times to help with the paperwork, transcript review, and tracking the applicants. Under the category on page 10, top of page 10, for educational and student safety software platforms, several platforms here. Edgenuity was currently funded in ESSER this from 2018 until the pandemic. This is the primary platform we use for credit recovery, some initial credit, and also heavily for content recovery for our students who were not successful in passing high school courses. The Elevation platform actually was funded by the State Department of Education prior. They are no longer funding this. But this helps our multilingual teachers and staff document the plans, the monitoring, the screening, the identification, and our service as we're required to document.
Good morning. Gaggle is our next platform. It is a highly effective software designed to ensure student safety through 24-hour digital monitoring, threat detection, and wellness checks. This platform monitors school-issued accounts for signs of harmful behavior and content. And you have a chart below that shows the different categories for the alerts.
ICV at the top of page 11, continuing on with that. This was paid, again, previously out of ESSER. This offers our students a broad range of career and technical education curricula and instructional materials for students to use online. So this is a critical software piece for our students who continue to participate in our virtual school and online courses. No Red Ink, primarily middle school program. This provides our students with personalized writing and grammar instruction, provides some assistance as well to help them become better writers by leveraging the interest specific to each student. So it's a personalized learning approach for writing. Text Help supports our students in reading, writing, and mathematics. It's also an assistive technology to help our students address those areas of literacy and accessibility. The software offers features such as text-to-speech, predictive typing, vocabulary support, and data-driven insights into student progress to help our students who may need some additional help. Magic School AI at the bottom of page 11, as Dr. Royster mentioned. This is an artificial intelligence tool that helps our teachers save 8 to 10 hours a week on some of the tasks that are not instructional based, but are tasks that are critical that they have to complete. Magic School was free for all teachers up until February when it became a paid subscription. For arts and athletic support funds at the top of page 12, The All-County Jazz Ensemble Conductor Supplement would establish a supplement to fund the Greenville All-County Jazz Ensemble Conductor position. The second item there, middle and high school choral supplement adjustment. The requirements for middle and high school chorus teachers are almost identical to that of the middle school band and middle school orchestra. There is, however, a significant gap in the supplement pay to middle and high school choral teachers in comparison, so this attempts to rectify that gap.
The next item is increased supplement for strength coaches with the expansion of high school strength and conditioning programs and the year-round functioning of our weight rooms. Strength coaches are investing significant time training all athletes year-round. This helps us to remain competitive with our neighboring districts. The next item is increased support funds for middle school athletics. No direct adjustment has been made to the funding for middle school athletics in several years. This item would provide an increase of $1,400 per middle school. Our next item is an ad from the work session. It's 15-day supplemental pay for athletic directors. This adds 15 days of pay for all athletic directors and is a step towards comparability in compensation as compared to their regional counterparts. We have experienced the loss of several athletic directors to other school districts in the last 6 months, and with the primary reason being significant increase in pay.
Our Career Center student certifications line, you'll see, has been zeroed out. We've received notification that an increase from the state for revenue specifically designated to CT certifications will be coming to us this coming school year, so this eliminates the need for this item in the general fund budget. Summer school for the last couple of years has been funded through ESSER. We have, however, reduced from the previous amount of the work session by limiting the provision of transportation to elementary students only. There would be an option for middle school students to engage in summer school both online and face-to-face if they need that option due to transportation. All high school summer school currently is scheduled online with labs available for students who need to come into school for some in-person help or tutoring with our certified teachers.
Instructional supply dollars for schools are allocated on a per school, per class, per student basis. This item, costing $371,000, increases the instructional materials per pupil allocation by 12% to assist with the rising cost of supplies for our students. Teacher salary schedule increase of $2,700. This item increases all cells on the teacher salary schedule by $2,700, $200 more than the $2,500 increase presented at the board work session. With this increase, the starting salary for a first-year teacher in Greenville County Schools will be $50,503. Teachers receiving a step with this additional $2,700 will receive salary increases between 3.6% and 7.3%, with the average increase to our teachers being 5.5%. Next item, adding step 36 to the schedule. Our current teacher salary schedule has steps from 0 years experience to 35. Adding 36 will ensure that our most experienced teachers at the top of the salary schedule receive the 3.6 minimum salary increase with step movement.
Next item, bus driver compensation for years of experience. This increase funds employees who move into a new salary category based on their years of service or experience. This continues the district's strategy to recruit, hire, and retain bus drivers.
The top of page 14, the clinical license non-exempt salary schedule will receive an additional 1.5% increase above the recommended increase for other non-teacher salary schedules. The first 4 steps will also be eliminated, condensing the schedule, moving entry pay for school RNs to $47,994 and top pay to $64,267. This is to increase retention and improve recruitment for these positions. Non-teacher salary schedules will be increased to ensure that employees will receive a minimum 3.5% increase with step movement. This will assist to partially address the rate of inflation and support retention and recruitment of quality personnel. The next item, increase minimum starting hourly pay to $16.08. The current minimum hourly wage in the district stands at $15.06. We're proposing this to be increased to $16.08. This adjustment would enhance our ability to both recruit and retain employees. By offering a more attractive wage, we can be more competitive in the current marketplace. Additional condensing schedule changes will be made to the support hourly and support annual schedules as recommended by our Human Resources Department. The next item, adjusting salaries, equity for missteps. During the FY23 budget cycle, principal pay underwent complete adjustment to ensure internal fairness, while other employees' pay received partial adjustments to address the issue of pay steps falling behind their years of experience. In FY24, a second adjustment was implemented for other employees. This marks the conclusion of adjustments from missteps among non-teaching staff.
The next item is support staff for the new elementary school that will open August of 2025. In keeping with our past practice, we will hire the principal 1 full year ahead of the school opening for students, and then we'll hire the secretary and plant engineer 1/2 of a year before the students report. So that amount has not changed at $223,000.
Classroom Mosaic is our teacher observation platform we implemented 2 years ago. This line item actually increases and enhancements to help bring all of our observations that principals have to do into one platform. Currently, only informal observations are done in Classroom Mosaic. This would bring our formal, informal, adept, pastee, and any other observation principals do into this one system.
Moving to page 15, the district has chosen a new online teacher candidate assessment tool following the cessation of operations by our current vendor, Crown Global. The selected tool, Gallup Teacher Insight Screener, is considered the industry standard and is in line with our training and expectations. It's expected to offer research-based support for principals in evaluating the most suitable candidates for classroom positions. The $27,000 is the variance in cost between the current budgeted system and the replacement system. Next item, there's an increased cost associated with employee background checks for potential district employees. An additional $65,000 is needed for this item.
Next, under Goal 3, Caring Culture and Environment, first item, athletic trainers. In the FY24, Prisma Health ended its practice of providing athletic trainers to GCS schools free of charge. That year, they began charging us $10,000 per trainer. This upcoming year, the cost will increase to $20,000 per trainer. This with an established baseline of 25 athletic trainers district-wide is resulting in an increase of $250,000 from the previous year. The next item, bilingual attendance supervisors, that is a 2.0 FTE to meet increased demand that has been evident post-pandemic. 2 bilingual attendance supervisors are currently funded out of ESSER, will be shifted to the general fund to maintain effectiveness of the attendance services department, particularly in serving Spanish-speaking families. Next item, carpenter, 2.0 FTE. With the additions completed at 5 elementary schools in August of 24, we've added a significant square footage to the district, and there has been no additions to this craft in many years. Next item, fire and burglar alarm technician is a 1.0 FTE. Again, with the additional fire and burglar alarm technician is needed to more effectively cover each section of the district in a similar manner assigned by the other technicians. Given the added square footage in the district, this fire burglar tech would address the increasing number of work orders, as well as allow more time for preventive maintenance on these systems.
Custodians are allocated on a formula basis. With the increased square footage at 5 of our elementary schools in FY25, an additional 5.5 FTEs will be earned.
The top of page 16, we have septic pumping preventive maintenance. Septic tanks are currently pumped on an as-needed basis. This item will provide a proactive approach And this action should prevent increased maintenance costs associated with the current reactive process. Under grounds preventive maintenance, first item, increase high school athletic field growth regulator. High school stadium fields need to be treated with growth regulator 2 times per year. And this item will enhance wear tolerance, playability, and safety on the fields. The next item is high school athletic field overseed with perennial ryegrass. Again, overseeding high school stadium fields with perennial ryegrass will enhance wear tolerance, playability, and safety on the fields. Phrase mowing. These phrase mowings mowers are specialized machines, and over time a lip tends to build up where the dirt and grass meet on baseball and softball fields, which presents a potential safety hazard. Phrase mowing will cut down on the lip and maintain an even edge between the grass and dirt at the high school baseball and softball fields at a cost of $600 per infield. Next item is ETS System Specialist 2, a 1.0 FTE. So the district currently requires that each new software application be vetted for security, network compatibility, and rostering purposes. There's a current backlog that cannot be addressed at the current staffing levels, and this position will assist to help to address this issue.
We have reduced the Wi-Fi on school bus amount from what was presented to 0. We have submitted a grant proposal to secure funding for the item, but haven't heard anything at this point. If the grant is not approved, we have identified sufficient funding in the FY25 federal Title IV budget to cover this need for the upcoming year.
Next item, school safety software and Evolve subscription. The Evolve subscription is 8 one-year subscriptions. That's 1 for each unit for the concealed weapons detection platform. This will provide flexibility to conduct scans simultaneously at multiple schools with greater frequency and increased randomness. It will also give us the capability to deploy more than one athletic event or extracurricular activities, expanding our presence and increasing safety at these events. On the top of page 17, safety software. This is our Raptor Student Safe module within the Raptor software system. And this adds to our emergency management suite. Currently, our behavior threat assessment and management process, or otherwise known as BTAM. This process is consists of schools downloading individual PDF Word forms and then storing those documents at the school level. This new system will allow us to eliminate that option for the paperwork and house it in a mobile a systematic platform that will increase our ability to track these BTAMs and also as students move from school to school. The next item on the technology contracts, network load balancers is first item. And these serve to distribute the network load across multiple district systems to increase performance and capability. This supports numerous web-based applications such as Active Directory Federation Services login system, Google logins, PowerSchool, email, Backpack, Enrich, and GC Source. These are essential in maintaining the operation and continuity of services throughout the district. And this item is no longer eligible for E-rate reimbursement. Next item is Web Access Filter. Is another security appliance that protects all district web applications such as Backpack, web server, email, district portal, etc., from external threats. This item is also no longer eligible for E-rate reimbursement. Firewalls is another layer of protection defending the entire district network from unauthorized access. providing access to critical systems such as internet access, PowerSchool, Lawson, email, student web filtering, the telephone system, and web services. Manufacturers have notified us that the current model must be upgraded to handle a greater capacity, and new hardware will be required. This will give us the ability to, the ability to secure E-rate reimbursement for this expense has been significantly reduced. The next item, Voice over Internet Protocol licensing, enables voice communication to traverse the internet over IP-based networks by converting voice signals into digital data packets. This system, we've employed this system of technology for 20 years. The subscription model has evolved from a one-time multi-year contract to an annual fee structure. This item is not eligible for E-rate reimbursement.
Moving to the top of page 18 under Goal 4 Resource Stewardship, there is an estimated $507,000 insurance premium increase projected for FY '25.
Yes, the next item is pupil activity support. Ongoing and engaging student activities, of course, have a measurable positive effect on attendance, behavior, and course performance. The district already provides significant support for these activities. This would enhance that support. You can see that we have recalculated the initial implementation of this support for pupil activities to reduce the overall impact to the general fund budget. The amount now is $1,038,000. The previous amount was $1,290,000. You can see from the table that that difference is simply based on the reduction in the multiplier per pupil times the poverty rate. At the high school, it was changed from $50 per pupil to $35, at the middle from 10 to 8, and at the elementary from $5 to $4 per pupil. So that is what caused that difference.
The next item, e-bidding and contract management software. This software will allow the district to solicit and receive bids electronically. It also provides us the ability to maintain and track all district contracts and manage vendor performance and yearly renewals. The system will expand our capability to reach a wider audience, including local vendors for solicitations. Energy software. The Energy Management Department is responsible for controlling the operating costs of all buildings and grounds. The district was informed that utility manager, the energy management software system would no longer be supported or updated. So this recommendation is for replacement software to track and manage energy costs. On the next page, on 19 at the top, this is a change from the work session. That item has been zeroed out. As a large commercial account, the district pays both a metered usage and fuel surcharge for generation costs to electricity providers. Although rate increases are an almost certainty, current fuel surcharge is on a downward trend, which will assist in meeting the costs resulting from a rate increase. Additionally, we have engaged a contractor and established a timeline to implement the final phase of the LED lighting replacement project, which will provide additional savings in the second half of the fiscal year.
Academic contract increases. The first one there, the instrument funding increase. We have a goal of increasing our annual funding to $300,000, from $300,000 to $350,000 in order to keep up with the purchase of our large musical instruments and related equipment. This request will fund an intermediate increase of $50,000 to help move us to $250,000 in annual funding. The GoGuardian software allows our teachers to monitor students on their devices while in the classroom. And the Instructure platform is our benchmark testing platform that we administer benchmarks through 3 times a year. Those benchmarks provide information to our principals and district staff on curriculum and professional development and coaching. And it also meets the requirement of South Carolina now that we are required to benchmark 3 times a year and report those results to the State Department of Education.
So the next item is cost increases for existing service and supply contracts. The prices of materials, supplies, services continue to increase, resulting in higher costs to the district. This amount represents increases to the school maintenance and support budgets in the building services, maintenance, security, grounds, and ETS departments for existing contracts and materials. All of our significant multi-year contracts include an escalation clause restricted to an index rate of inflation.
Page 20, there are 3 expenditure reductions for the FY '25 budget. Langston Charter has been approved to move to the Charter Institute at Erskine effective July 1, 2024. The charter formula payment of $3,361,000 is a savings to the general fund. Overbrook Child Development Center will be closing at the end of this year, resulting in facility savings will be $371,000. And the last item, Greenville Early College Program is moving from its current location at University Center to 3 strategically selected high school campuses. The resulting facility savings will be $531,000. That concludes the expenditure presentation. Dr. Royster?
Thank you. Dr. Stiles?
Once again, I would just like to say thank you to each and every one of you. That was a very thorough budget and a fabulous presentation and helped us really understand the details, the ins and outs. Dr. Royster, do you have any summary comments that you would like to make before we move to board discussion?
Only other than we have based this budget, as we have, I think without exception, every budget that I've ever been a part of recommending in my 20 years in the district, based on first recognizing the importance of our employees, how they contribute to the quality of this district, and putting that ahead of other items. But there also is a need to address inflationary cost. There's a need to pick up some software expenses that, for one, at one point was E-rate eligible and is no longer. But just like everybody else, we suffer from the rates of inflation. As I mentioned in my opening comments, there are a number of things in here that are perhaps maintenance type things in nature. We saw the results of not investing in those items that ended up significantly contributing to the cost of the BEST program. So we've tried to make certain that we are always looking towards the future, try to avoid cost down the road. Sometimes that requires a cost up front, though. So any questions that you all have, we're glad to try to answer them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Royster. At this time, I would like to open the floor for discussion, comments, or questions. Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell?
Dr. Royster, what is that E-rate and what government agency does it come from that we're not going to be receiving?
Well, we do still
Reimbursements
receive
from?
reimbursement for certain things. E-rate is a program administered through the FCC, isn't that right, Bill? That provides certain allowable technology expenditures to be provided for a level of reimbursement. Sometimes it's a small percentage. Sometimes we have some that are 100%, don't we, Bill? The other thing that happens with E-rate is it is often a trailing reimbursement. You got to spend the money up here, and in some cases, we're 2-3 years out from recouping the E-rate. In fact, there are some things that we have been purchasing through E-rate that was E-rate that we actually expended and were reimbursed for several years ago, but we've been able to spend it more recently because we didn't get it in the year it was reimbursed. And the rules have changed fairly often as to what you may seek reimbursement for and in what amount they may be willing to reimburse you. So some of these things were noted here, you no longer can get E-rate. Some of them said the E-rate is reimbursed at a lower rate now. There are other things that don't appear in here that we're getting E-rate reimbursement for. That's why they don't appear in here.
That's a little confusing.
It's extremely confusing. In fact, that's why we engage a third party to file for our E-rate reimbursements, because you have to be extremely knowledgeable of all the rules so that you don't apply for ineligible items, have those items funded, then you get your agency or entity in trouble with the FCC for having obtained E-rate funding you weren't eligible to receive. It's extremely complicated.
Okay. Well, on to my next question. With the bus driver's compensation for years of experience, we gave the bus drivers, well, everybody got bonuses this year, right?
They didn't get a bonus, they got a raise. We set up a schedule that is both similar and dissimilar to the teacher schedule, and basically there's two steps. So these are people moving from one group to the next.
Okay, I know, we have a shortage in bus drivers, but I'm hearing from them that the new ones that came in August didn't get whatever the rest of them got in January. Is that
No,
correct?
that's not correct. The same wage rate applied to a bus driver, no matter when they were hired, if they came on board this year.
So they didn't get any kind of a bonus mid-year? And then
Bus
one at
drivers,
the end of the year?
yes, bus drivers qualify and have for a number of years a safety and attendance bonus. So you have to be here and, for lack of a better description, not have an accident. Well, if you weren't here the first half of the year, you don't get the bonus paid out in the middle of the year.
If you were here since August, that's the first half of the year, and you had to, is that something you have to opt into?
No, but you have to earn it. You have to meet the attendance requirement, and you can't have chargeable accidents.
Okay, I need some more information on that,
Well,
because they are very confused. The bus
Then
drivers are very confused.
they need to talk to
About that. Who do they need to
a
talk
HR
to?
rep or talk to Mr. James or his designee.
Okay,
That's separate and apart from their pay. It's a flat
Right.
bonus amount
right,
related to attendance and safe driving. We implemented that probably 12, 13 years ago.
okay. All right, so they just need to get in touch with HR?
Get in touch with
But
HR,
they
they
are
get in touch
very
with
confused
Mr.
about
James'
that.
office.
Okay, that's all I have, Carolyn, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Doolin?
My questions are related to what you said about projecting the budget within 98% of expenses.
Yes.
Now that I have a few years' worth of these budget notebooks, it's easier to compare. So I looked at last year's budget, which, well, this current year and the previous year, to compare. And I started with our board, the section for our board that we have all spent or has been spent on behalf of us. If y'all want to look, it's at the way back of your notebook in the line item section. Section 4, page 1. And it says that we budget $100,000 a year for legal services, which I have not been aware that we spent that, but apparently one year we spent $3,000. The next year we spent $53,000, but the budget still remains at $100,000. That isn't anywhere near 98%.
We don't try to budget every line item at 98%. One thing you have to understand, that you're talking about an amount of $100,000 in a total budget that right now is over $900 million. So we're looking at the whole budget.
I
You
understand.
budget for things like legal expenses. You can't necessarily look at 1 year. To your point, you used two very different numbers there.
Well,
What
this-
were the
I
two
started
numbers
in
you used?
2020 This is 2021, 2022, 23.
But you gave me two different numbers. One number was, I believe, about $5,000.
3,500.
3,500, and the other one was 53,000. So you cannot predict to the dime what you might spend in that category. Those are likely settlements paid out, not covered by insurance or to meet the deductible for insurance, or they may be for some contract work. We keep the amount in there based on history, not just 3 years worth. But there's no way to go in and look at every line item that equals that amount and try to reduce each one of them to 98%. If you do that, you're going to end up a whole bunch of items over and a whole lot of them under. So we look at all expenditures by group and by category. And we look at how we've concluded the last several years. The last several years, as I pointed out to you, is not a good indicator of what an ordinary fund balance revenue should be at the end of the year. In other words, expense under revenue, because we had millions of dollars in ESSER that we simply used to journal entry budgeted expenditures. It created revenue in excess of expense tremendously beyond what we would normally generate.
Well, we didn't use any ESSER funding for our board travel expenses, which are less than half of what we budget. We budget $212,000 for purchase services, of which we spend roughly $12,000 a year. I don't even know what that is for, but it's roughly $1,000 for each of us that is spent. Where we budget $212,000, if we just budget what we actually spend, that would save $200,000 in tax collection.
If you assured you didn't spend more than that, yes.
Y'all don't spend more than that. Each of you, all of you.
Well, I guess the point there being there are things there that you don't have control over. You have control over how much you travel. You don't have any control over how much legal fees might occur or what settlement costs might occur. We do that based on history. And if we start looking at every account the way you're looking at them, we will not end up being inside 2%. We will end up in a significant financial problem. You look out across this room, you look at the number of people sitting in this room that have had a hand in this budget and the years of experience and training they've had in doing so. We are not seeking to take any more of the taxpayers' money than we absolutely need to have to ensure that we provide the level and quality of service that we are providing, and to make certain that we're being accountable and that we're not overspending or that we're not engaging in unsound financial or budgeting practices that could result in running a budget in the red, could result in having our credit rating decrease. One, going directly to the financial stability of the district. The second, going to ultimately, to your point, cost to the taxpayers. We have to sell bonds, we have to sell them at a higher interest rate. That's an additional cost to the taxpayer for which they're seeing no return. You know, getting return obviously on the interest you pay on a bond, that's just more money you have to pay out in order to use that money.
Well, I went through and looked at all the different departments to see where there were significant differences in the amount budgeted and the actual amount spent, without cutting any of the spending at all and still being very generous with budgeting a little bit more than what has been spent the last few years. I came up with $5 million difference. And I feel like that's a significant enough amount that maybe there's an issue with how much is budgeted over how much is actually needed.
Without being too repetitious, you have the recommendation of the administration. You heard a description of the amount of time and effort that's put into that. There are people that are involved in that are vastly experienced in this level of work. We are committed to asking for no more resources than we believe that we need to have. What you recommend doing, I would certainly not recommend. It is not, in a manner of speaking, it is not physically responsible to do the budget the way you're recommended to do it, based on your observation of under and over expenditures within departments. Now, again, that's a decision of this body, what amount they wish to approve a budget for. If you approve a lesser dollar amount, however, the administration is going to recommend a lesser dollar budget to you. Because again, what you're asking us to look at is not the most fiscally responsible manner in which to assemble a budget to present to you all. And that is our charge, both by policy and ethically, to do.
Dr. Royster, I understand what you're saying and I appreciate it, but I don't necessarily want to put anyone else in the spotlight. That's why I started with our board, because I feel like there are cuts that we could make, but I'm gonna look at the planning department's budget for other services. They budgeted $310,000 one year and $356,000 the next year, and spent less than $100,000 on each of those years. So where did that other $200,000 or $250,000 go? I'm not talking about $5 here and there.
Where does it go? If something is underspent in the budget, when the auditors close out the books, they provide you with a number. And we present to you a recommendation with how to spend that number. And every year you all have spent that money. And what you have ended up spending it for, in most cases, were items that had you not spent that, you would have either had to raise taxes, not do, or push out further.
So this item, whatever it is, I'm not even judging the planning department, is spend $100,000 on the things that you need, but if you budget $350,000 but only spend roughly $100,000, you're saying you take that $250,000 and say, well, it wasn't spent, so we're just gonna move up some building projects with that money instead?
When you put all that money together, at the end of the day, what's 2% of $920 million? That's $18.4 million. That's a pretty significant chunk to apply towards a project that otherwise you'd either have to defer out in time or raise taxes to do. We will operate inside whatever budget this board recommends, but your policy calls for us to present you a recommended budget. We have presented you one. If you want to reduce the amount, we will take whatever that amount is and we will present you with a new budget. It is not possible to budget to 100% of every expenditure. If you try to do that, the budget will run in the red.
Well, what happens when things do run in the red?
Wouldn't know. I've never been part of preparing a budget that ran in the red.
Well, under district management services, which includes the superintendent and all of the assistant superintendents, your budgeted services were $34,000, but you spent $51,000. And I don't know where the rest of that came from, but
Within
nobody's judging. It's fine.
within the non-salaried budget, the administration can move funds from any function to any other function. We do not have the authority by policy to move salary dollars to non-salary accounts. So inside that, was it 68 million? We can move that money as we may need to move it. We may have some issue arise that you cannot forecast with 100% accuracy everything that's going to happen next May, this May, or next June, this May. Something you may have budgeted for using the best information you had at the time may cost more even than an increased budget amount calls for you to spend for that item. So finance constantly watches budgets to see if one's over here and one's under here. If you want to use that as an example, there's also a contingency line item in there that I don't believe was touched at all, which more than covers the amount the other account was overexpended. These accounts are fluid and they're monitored, and money is transferred back and forth as it's needed to ensure that accounts don't run into the red. When I'm talking about running into the red, I'm talking about the total general fund budget. It has never in my 20 years in this district run in the red, nor in my previous role in another district. I can't speak for history prior to 20 years. Robin can. I'm not sure there's ever been a time the general fund budget ran into the red in your 34 years, Robin. Yeah, that is absolutely something you don't want to happen.
No one is suggesting that anything run in the red. If you have a $175,000 contingency account in your budget every year, over 10 years, if you don't spend it, that's $1.75 million. And if you need it, it's fine, but if you don't spend it, why would it be in the budget for the next year, the $175,000 for last year?
It's in there, and it is in there in case it is needed. And if, to your point, if it's not needed, it's not spent, because we don't spend if we don't need to.
We don't need to tax for it the next year because you still have it from the previous year.
You know, I've tried to make my point the best way I know how. But we're looking at, right now, a $922,256,000 budget. And you're talking about items of $5,000, $50,000, $100,000.
Add up to 5 million. That's a significant amount.
I'm sorry I didn't interrupt you. You're talking about items that when you string them all together, and you've identified this margin, what you didn't take into account are there items that are overspent that funds need to be shifted to. You also didn't take into account that at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we've got somewhere between 1% and 2% of that $922 million sitting there. 1% of it is $9 million. 2% is $18.4 million. If you don't have any margins anywhere in that budget, you will not have that margin at the end of the fiscal year. And what we are saying to you is if you don't have that kind of margin already built into the budget, you are running into the danger of going in the red on the $922 million. I don't know any other way to say it.
Well, I don't know what else you could say today. I find it frustrating when I look at budgets and actual expenses over years, and there's a certain amount budgeted, which is taxes collected. The amount spent is significantly less, and then the next year is budgeted for significantly more when it should. Business says you should just budget for what you need, not for literally $200,000 more than you spent. Especially, I mean, you've already collected more tax, you would have that in savings. So I guess I'm confused about why the budget increases so much for certain items when they're not spent the previous year. I mean, nobody would do that in their business. And it doesn't even have to be a use it or lose it situation. It's, I mean, if you need it, it's there. But this clearly, if there's $770,000 budgeted, but only $650,000 is spent, I don't know why you wouldn't budget more closely to $650 for the next year instead of budgeting $680. That's $200,000 more than was spent. And I didn't know to look for this before until I could go back and look for previous years and previous notebooks to see that it's not just 1 year, it's since 2021. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm sure others have questions. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Ms. Doolin. Ms. Middleton.
Thank you for this, again, very comprehensive budget. So I need to take a few minutes and go back to 101 basics. So looking at millage, I am confused on, it says the 2024 tax was on that Toyota Camry, which is a good example. 156.7 mils is equal to $18.80. So in this year, it's showing the 2025 tax. Are we saying we're gonna have an increase of 3.8 mils at this time? And that the increase will be $18.30.
That's the total tax.
That's a total tax. Like in my mind, if you had a Toyota Camry, that's all you had, 2011, you would pay $18 more. No, you wouldn't.
You would pay a total of $18.30,
Okay, $18.30.
which is a total of $18.30. That this year you paid 50 cents more on.
I mean, it's good that it's less, but I don't understand why it's 156.7 mils last year, and this year it's 3.8 mils.
That 3.8 is the add to 156.7. That add gives you a total of $18.30, 50 cents less than what you paid in the previous year. The reason for that is the way the state law is structured regarding the assessment of motor vehicles is that no vehicle can be assessed at greater than 95% of the amount it was assessed for in the preceding year. So if your tax increase is inside that 5%, if you do a tax increase that's inside that 5%, the tax you pay on your car, if you still own the same car, will not go up. And in fact, it will go down.
So we're saying that, what was the millage increase? So you're saying the millage last year was 156.7.
It went from 147.7 to 156.7.
Okay, so now it's gonna go 3.8 more, so it's actually gonna be 159 or 160 or something.
Right, for which you would pay $18.30 total property tax on that car. The same car that in '23 you paid $19.20 for, and the car that you paid in this year $18.80 for.
So we're showing the 2023, the 2024, the total millage, and now on 2025 in the picture, we're just showing that this is gonna be going up that much more, but we're not showing the total. So that's what I didn't see.
No, this is the total. That's not the total millage, it's the total dollar amount. Yes, ma'am, just to be clear. So the total millage is the number you added the 3.8 and the 156.72. Yes, that would be the total, but just as a reminder, that $18.30 is still the total tax on that car.
So there will be an increase of $18.30.
No, there's a decrease of 50 cents.
So there is no increase this year.
If you don't buy a new car or a newer car or another car, you pay less taxes on your car in the coming year than you paid this year. Just like this year, you paid less taxes on it than you did the year before, even though there was a tax increase. And predominantly what the citizens of the school district pay on for school operating purposes are cars, trucks, boats, motorcycles, a trailer that requires a tag, or somebody has an airplane, you pay on an airplane if it's housed here. But all of those depreciate. So all of them have as long as you don't buy a new one or another one, all of those have a lesser value in the coming year than they had in this year.
So there is no millage increase this year for us.
The only people that would pay additional tax would be if you bought another vehicle or one of those things I mentioned, or a newer one than the one you have. Then if you are a small business, you would pay on your property or equipment. But then you have the ability, and you can't really calculate it one-to-one, but if you invest in a new building, or even the building you have, you can depreciate that and it becomes a deduction on the tax you pay on your income, not on your property tax. So it's hard to say. It will affect some people. One of the speculations as to why our vehicle property tax rate is continuing to climb, the amount we're taking in, twofold. One, apparently a lot of people are buying new cars. The other is, by some estimates, there are 35 people a day moving into Greenville. And I'm gonna guess most of those people have a car. So they're bringing a car onto the tax books every day that wasn't on the tax books the day before, and wasn't on the tax books the previous year. So when they go get that new tag, the South Carolina tag, if they moved here from out of state, or when they go to renew their tag if they move from somewhere in the state, then there is a new car or a new older car being added to the tax rolls. Because that incumbent growth, because we don't get anything off of them buying a house.
Right.
But when they move in, however many vehicles they own, we are getting a property tax increase based on the ownership of those vehicles.
Somehow, I'm not understanding that we do need more money this is an increased budget. We are increasing the budget.
Yes.
Okay, good. And you're saying there's not gonna be any millage increase to the consumer?
There would be no millage increase to an individual who does not buy a new car, a newer car, or an additional car, or boat, truck, trailer that takes a tag, or motorcycle. But yes, some people will pay additional taxes. It is not the broad-based impact that some people would believe it to be.
Obviously, there's gonna be, if you buy a new car, you're gonna have to pay
Yes.
taxes on that. I mean, I understand that. But
And if you own commercial property,
right, then you pay taxes on that.
unless you got a fee in lieu or
Right.
you're in a multi-county park,
But if you don't change anything as a consumer,
just as an individual person,
you're not gonna
that,
be paying any extra taxes this year for the schools.
as an individual person,
Individual person.
that would be
Okay.
correct. Now, if you own a business, your business would, or could.
Right, of course. So whatever you've been paying would continue. It would be the same as long as you don't change, buy property or,
Oh,
a building
now,
or buy something.
That would be
else.
for a business. If you, as a homeowner, you bought a new home and it was valued at more than the old one, you don't pay school operating taxes on that at all, so that has no effect.
It has no effect. All right. So for, like a lot of people, it would really have no effect.
For most individuals, considering the number of the population in the county and the number of those people that would own a small business or business, would not have a direct effect on most people, I would imagine, because most people don't own their own business. The largest two employers in Greenville County schools, is Prisma Health in the Greenville County schools, for people that are physically located inside the boundaries of the school district.
That's good. I understand that now. Thank you very much. Also, I know a lot of our budget goes to teachers and all that. So is the budget based on the teachers that we have now? Do we have enough teachers for next year? And will we have to factor in like any new teachers or, I know that some teachers were excess and they go to other schools, so.
There is a line in there for personnel for growth that covers the teachers and school level personnel, except for those 5 custodians, that are necessary for growth in student enrollment. Because you have an allocation formula, you have this many students, you get this many employees. We base both newly added positions and turnover on average salary. more than 60% of the teachers that we hire are experienced teachers. I think a lot of people might falsely believe that the number of teachers we hire either to replace teachers leaving or where we're adding teachers, I think they might envision them all being first-year teachers. About 60% of them are experienced teachers. So we budget to the average so that we make sure that we have covered whoever they might employ in those positions.
So we know the number of positions, the number of people we need, and so we've budgeted for that.
Yes, and we have,
People leave and we got new people coming in.
we budget to cover those things because they will not, you could have, for example, you could have a second-year teacher leave the district and replaced by a teacher with a master's degree in 12 years. Or you could have an experienced teacher leave the district and be replaced by an inexperienced teacher. But on average, we're hiring that average teacher for most of our vacancies.
Did not get another Evolve, right? There's no, I saw that on the Evolve, you have subscriptions,
That's a subscription.
but we don't have a new one.
We have 2 in process that are grant funded. So they have no impact to the general fund or the capital budget.
But we are getting 2 more Evolves.
Yes.
Just one more question. I see a lot of areas where we're factoring in inflation, construction costs, and things of that nature. Is there a general overall inflation number for the general budget? And is it less than our current inflation rate?
No, the only place we applied an inflation rate is where we specifically said that to you. And the current rate of inflation is 4.12, and last year it was 8. So we still have some distance to make up when you look at last year and this year. Now, almost all of our contracts, other multi-year contracts, they have an escalator clause in them. Otherwise, we wouldn't get people to agree to multi-year contracts. And that escalator clause is tied to the rate of inflation. So some of these contract increases, that's per the contract we already have out for that item to cover the allowable escalation cost. Otherwise, you would not get the benefits, which is generally a reduced cost, of being able to leverage multi-year contracts.
Last easy question. When does the fiscal year start?
July 1, which our budget timeline works backwards from that date because that's a pretty significant lift for finance and HR to load into the systems, pay and budgets that begin July 1. They absolutely need 10 working days. They prefer to have more than that, but we work backwards from that date to try to meet when we get the information from the General Assembly. So that really is what dictates the timeline of when we present the budget to you all.
Thank you, Mrs. Middleton. Ms. Brett?
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. This is maybe just a reminder question. And so the general fund actually comes from state and local.
Yes.
Federal funding, where does that go? Remind me, I know we've talked about it a million times, but I forget.
All federal funding is lumped under the category of special revenue. And there's one sort of exception to that. We treat food and nutrition services as standalone business unit, right, Robin? It's been an enterprise fund and a business unit.
It is considered a special revenue now for accounting purposes. But
Right. So we operate FANs separate from the district, but accountable to the district. Those USDA funds, so the food service funds come from the Department of Agriculture. They go into the FANs budget. All those other federal funds, so you got Title 1, 2, 3, 4, what used to be 94, 142, which is a SPED funding. What other big one did I leave out?
Perkins.
Perkins, which is devoted to career and technical only. and is limited in what you can use it for. All of them are limited in what you can use it for, but like Perkins, you can't hire people with it. You can buy equipment, pay for training, you can do some other things with it. All those appear in the special revenue budget. All of those, we write a plan that describes how we would expend those funds in accordance with they're now in all cases federal. There's not really any state special revenues.
There are a few.
The EIA gets rolled into the general fund though in salary. There's still a small EIA amount outside of it. You write a plan in accord with the rules and regulations of those expenditures, but all of those budgets together are around 125, Robin?
Just the federal? Ugh.
They're a small fraction of the $900 million general fund budget. The general fund budget is basically the driving budget of the district, other than capital improvements, which would be buildings, additions, large equipment, or projects that extend the life of a building. So like putting a roof on, we could fall under capital. Routine things that our maintenance people buy to go out and fix something, can't spend capital for that because it's not extending the life of the system. So if they have to come work on a water fountain and they have to buy parts for it, that has to be charged out of the general fund. And that's one of the increases in here, is to offset the increase in the supplies, equipment, small equipment, parts that they have to buy on a daily basis.
So basically, federal funding is not even, one, it's not in this, but of our total budget, an eighth, maybe at the most, of all that we spend or that we get. If that.
Might be between the 7th and 8th. You've got the number now, Robin? Yeah, federal particularly.
For 24, the budget for special revenue was 214.8 million.
All right, how much of that is
It's federal.
federal, not counting the USDA,
Yeah.
which would be the things you can spend programmatically?
Oh, 128 million.
Okay.
Of that
So
was
right at 128 in the, like Title 1, 2, 3, 4, and Perkins. And the other thing about some of those, like Title 1, that's the two biggest ones in there. Take the food service one to the side. The two biggest ones are Title 1 and special ed. Title 1, you can only use that to pay for things beyond what you pay for non-Title 1 schools.
Okay.
They call it supplanting. So you can't take part of that money and pay for part of the teachers in a Title I school if those teachers are part of the district allocation formula for all schools. Like if you allocate teachers at 20 to 1, we can't go over to Alexander, for example, and take some of the teachers generated at 20 to 1 and charge them to Title I.
Okay.
That's illegal,
Right.
supplanting. Once you pay for something in the general fund, you can't move it and pay for it in a title fund, but you can do the back of that. We gave you an example in the Wi-Fi for the buses. If we don't get that grant, we can charge it to Title IV. We got enough space in there right now to charge it. If we'd been paying for that from the general fund, we couldn't have done that.
Okay.
We couldn't have moved it to Title IV. We were paying for it from a grant we got, which they will allow you to replace grant funding with. So there's all these rules, but for the most part, there's nothing in those special revenues that can help your general fund issues. They pretty much exist to do things that you aren't doing there. There's some small exceptions. The special ed one does pay for a number of people, but it does not pay for anywhere near what it costs to educate a special needs student.
Right.
Nor does the state allocation pay enough for that.
Okay. That was great. Thank you.
Ms. Brett, Ms. Mosley.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. Dr. Royster, I have just a couple of questions. I appreciate the fact that it's a very complicated process to get all this together, and I appreciate the fact that you do your best to ask for the minimum for all of us. I need to understand, however, but I think it's, let me say this, I think it's remiss of me to ignore the fact that even though the tax impact to some is very minimal, the tax impact to others is not. So what I feel like I'm missing here this year that I feel like you guys have provided in years before, but correct me if I'm wrong, you always give us the car example. What I don't see here is the small business example. And I also don't,
Yeah, I believe we did a machine shop, a flower shop, and what was the third one? Restaurant? We can run those for you, yeah.
okay. And then the other thing I don't see, and because we have heard from members of the community in the past, so I expect to hear from them again, is the impact to those that are landlords, which then pass it on to the renters in our community. So how do we get an accurate understanding, as these are our constituents too? It may not impact me personally as much, it may not impact some of my neighbors as much, but it's impacting somebody somewhere in the county, and most likely many in my area. How do we get an understanding for what that actually translates to? Because
We can
I
probably.
get the math doesn't work, so I'm trying to balance that.
Yeah, we can probably run we can probably find statistically the size, based on census data, of an average apartment complex and maybe run a value on it, because rental property varies so much from
I understand.
small house to huge
Right.
apartment complexes. They vary so much in value, so probably the way to do that would see if there's, generally speaking, there's things like that in census data when you break it out. So like, what's an average rental property in the county?
Well, and I'm sensitive to that. My parents do not live in our county, but they live in a county in our state, and they have been investment property owners for many, many years. And so every single time, so the Act 388, for example, really impacted them with the multiple homes that they rent. So I look through that lens sometimes. So that's why I'm looking at that.
And to your point, anybody that has even if they have a second home that's not a rental property,
Right.
they're gonna pay on that.
Right,
And they're gonna pay at 6%.
right.
Because you can only return one
And
residence.
that's a real dollar amount
at
for many
4%.
people. Yeah. So those are two things I was missing from this presentation that I think would help me out. I think you've answered this, but, and I do, I mean, I appreciate y'all gave us the 3 large items, the Langston, the early college, and whatever the third one was, that are
Overbrook.
reductions.
Yes.
Could you maybe you answered this a little bit in your answer to Ms. Doolin, but when y'all are going through the budget, you guys every year give us paragraphs for the items that you're adding or whatever, but clearly this notebook is full of lots of line items. Do y'all go through, is there a process that you go through this where you evaluate within those line items, what are some reductions we can make? Because obviously, we always seem to be asking for more, but I do know people like to see what we're going without. Does
Right.
that make sense?
We look through not just those additional requests, we look through every line item. Every third year, we go all the way back to 0. But they look at every line item every year. And there are always going to be line items that we underspend, there are always going to be some that we overspend. Just like the question came about budgeting for teacher pay, we have to budget for teachers we've not yet seen. We don't know who they're going to hire, but we look at past experience. And we're going to look back, as I mentioned to you, this year on revenue, we look back 13 years because the revenue was just more difficult to predict. We don't typically look that far back in expenditures. But what happened in 2011, we reduced the budget by $72 million over 3-year span. Sound right? So basically what happened is we tore the whole thing apart to get those reductions. We were able to get through that process without anybody losing their job. They might have lost the job they had, but they didn't lose a job. They got a job. So coming out of that, everything that's been added since then has gone through this process. So quite technically, we went all the way back to zero then. Then every third year, we've run back to zero as well, and that year was last year. And if you look back in the last 5 years, Robin, we had 2 years with zero millage increase. Am I right with the numbers at 5 or 6 years? So since 17, we had 3 years with zero millage increase.
Okay, so this is another question, and I'm just asking it because I don't have the benefit of history. How many of those years, or how many years within maybe the last 10, have we gone without increasing teacher pay?
The only year that we did not increase teacher pay was 2011. The state for that 1 year, that was in the midst of the recession, the state for that 1 year suspended the requirement of a step. So no one got a raise. No one in the district got a raise. Within 3 years of that time, we restored, I believe it was 3 years, we restored the step that teachers did not get. So 1 year they got 2 steps. So there is no one, some people still believe they lost that step. There is no one that did not ultimately receive the step they missed. There has never been a year, other than that one. In fact, there's not been a year in the 20 I've been here except that one, where employees did not receive some type of raise. Obviously, some years more so than other years.
So the $200 increase from what was recommended at the workshop to today, is that, and I noticed from a starting salary standpoint, that was only like $299. Both numbers put us at the $50,000 starting salary month.
Yes.
The $200, is that because of what you've learned in other counties, and that kind of gives us just a tiny bit of an edge because it's literally almost a $300 difference?
Exactly. That's what
Okay.
when we started looking at the number of people that were responding, we're going to 50.
Mm-hmm.
And, not to say they're not telling us the exact truth, but there might be that they're going to go a little more than that.
Right.
We try to get a little more margin to our 50 to try to stay inside the top 5. Well, obviously, we have no assurance of staying in the top 5, but to try to stay there. And this sounds kind of crazy, but it has to do with the number of people we have making that pay and the cost of benefits. Every $100 cost us $700,000, Robin, $770. So every $100 on teacher pay is $770,000 salary and fringe.
Okay, so my last question, and this, just please understand, I come out of the corporate world, so I'm going to ask a question about merit. In the business of education, we as a school district do not base decisions on merit. As far as, I know we do for like promotions and hires and stuff like that, but I'm talking about pay.
Right.
Particularly because when I worked in banking, for example, if you had a manager that had a budget, a bucket of money for salary increases or annual review, okay, if the standard was 5%, but they thought someone on their team deserved 7, that meant someone else on their team got 3. Is that what I'm saying? And so that was
0.
Or 0, right. And obviously, we have people in our district that are on improvement plans or whatever we want to call them. And so I'm just kind of wondering is this just an accepted flaw, for lack of a better word, in the educational system, that there's very difficult ways to base things on merit? Because I understand the measurements teachers face in the classroom,
right,
but that's different than a staff person over here in XYZ department. So I'm
We,
just asking for an overall,
well, one, you all approved, as you recall, a pilot for us to look at merit pay.
which is one of the reasons I voted for that.
And that applies to everybody in that building.
Mhm.
So it gives us an opportunity to, how would that look if we did it? Now, what that does, it adds pay on top. Because I guess the two factors you have to look at, and, you know, we shared that with you all earlier, we're recommended for non-teacher. That's really kind of what we're talking about. 3.5% increase. That's not even keeping them whole with what they made last year based on inflation.
Right.
So we're not really talking about a bonus
Right.
or a, in the, I guess the truest
Merit
sense,
pay.
it's not really a pay raise, it's to keep them where they were. But it doesn't quite do that. There was a time the district, I believe, Robin, if I'm correct, did some varying pay increases based on evaluation of personnel by their supervisors, non-teaching personnel. Is that right? But for a short period of time, the district did that. One of the issues with it is there, I believe, as I recall, what people have told me, because it was way before my time, there was way too much subjectivity in it, which is problematic. So the easy thing about the school one is that bonus is based on the school as a whole doing well, which is hard to translate that to departmental wise. Now, a number of years ago, we did freeze steps on some employees that were on improvement plans. That's not been done in a number of years, though.
But we have that ability.
Yeah, actually, we do.
Okay.
There's nothing that would prohibit us doing that.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. That's all I have right now. I may have others. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Ms. Morrison Fair?
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. Hopefully, this will be a short question, but I want to continue with the conversation on salaries and salary increases. And I appreciate the recommendations for increases. It seems to me you've included every group and subgroup and taken into consideration the majority of people in this organization. But I have some questions about, I think it goes back to Michelle's question, bus drivers and custodians. The question was, are we bringing people in at the entry level and people in our organizations make less?
No. Now, we could bring somebody in. Well, let me give you a more full answer. Custodian, that's a pretty common job. I mean, there are all kind of businesses, industry, other entities have custodians. Well, if you got 8 years experience being a custodian, we might put you in at 8. It's not limited to your experience with us. It could be your experience doing that job somewhere else. We're like a principal. If we hired an experienced principal, they've been a principal 5 years, we wouldn't put them the same place on the salary schedule that we would put somebody becoming a principal for the first year, even though they might both be their first year here. So the others work the same way, but there shouldn't be anybody with equal years of experience making less. And the custodial one is being addressed, moving the recommendation to move from 1506 to 1608. That moves all to custodial pay. That's, generally speaking, the people on those entry level schedules, and that's the bottom 2 wage scales moving up to 1608. Those would be custodians. Now, it's not in the general fund budget because they pay for it out of the FANS budget, but it would be FANS operators. Who else is in that group, Robin? There are aides in those groups. I believe it also moves the sub-teacher wage too. So it moves all those kind of entry-level position wages.
I appreciate your comment. That is the way I understood it, all factors being equal when someone
Yes,
is
ma'am.
hired. but maybe some of our employees don't understand it, so I appreciate that explanation.
No. And they wouldn't have any reason to know that the person working beside them's worked the same number of years they have doing that. They just haven't worked here that long.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison Fair. Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. I think you mentioned earlier that we went, which makes sense, taking the conservative approach with the Senate's version of how much money they might send us.
Yes, sir.
If they decided in the end, when they get together, to go with the House version, I realize compared to the size of our overall budget, that's not going to be a huge amount, but approximately how much of that money would likely come to Greenville County Schools out of that difference?
It was 2 million, 2.3
Right at
million.
2.14, does that sound right?
It was 2.3.
2.3.
In the best and worst case scenarios, when would we likely know how much money we're going to get? I know obviously at this point we can't say for sure, but just best case, worst case.
Julie?
Mr. Cochran, they are actually talking about the House budget right now. And what will happen is they have to adjourn mandatorily 5 p.m. on Thursday. A conference committee will be appointed this week. They have set June 18th as the time to come back after the primaries to deal with budget.
So with that in mind, obviously, it's not likely we're going to know that before we come back here on June the 3rd.
No, sir. That timeline is pushing us right up against when our people need to start loading the new budget into the system. Past years, it's been earlier than that, but
This is later, yes.
yeah.
If we could go back to the Toyota Camry example for just a moment.
Sure.
Do we have the statistics on what a brand new, what the tax increase with the 3.8 mils would be on a brand new Toyota Camry? What the tax would be and what the 3.8 mils would raise it to?
Yeah, we can get, it might be a year-old one because of the way they do it, but yeah, we can get you the most recent one that they have available. It maybe be a 24 model. We'll get that for you.
Thank you. That's it, Dr. Stiles. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. Dr. Presley.
Two quick questions. First of all, thank you all for the work that you put into this. And I echo our lawmakers in Columbia, unfortunately, don't do us a lot of favors with timelines, and that's just the harsh truth. Page 8, the interpretational services, it's 140,000, and I was just wondering about a little more clarification on, is that paying for people or like a equipment?
It's actually the software that we use, because it actually does, 50, 60, 80, 100 languages. It's actually any language, basically, we can get a teacher or a staff member to call that service, and they're the bridge between the language on the home and school.
Okay, thank you for that. And then on page 19, we talk about I believe it's Instructure, and Mr. McCoy, I think this one will go to you too. It's the benchmarking system.
Yes,
so there are 3 different things that are bulleted under that 722,000.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a number for what just Instructure costs?
Yeah, we would have the break that we can get you. Stephanie, do you have it?
In the 722 Instructures, 649,830.
And since it is a benchmarking system, are there assurances or is there a process or procedure when standards are revised that they do that alignment for us?
Yes, they do the alignment for us. It's based on the state blueprint. So if there's a little lag in the state blueprint, as there is one, they're gonna, we'll have to deal with that in the fall. The English one's a little behind, but they can't do that upgrade until the blueprint's released.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Leventis Wells.
Thank you, Dr. Stiles. I'm just going to ask for some information to be sent in this one question, where it's the salary and fringe budget. I would like to know, under teachers and teachers' aides, a comparison from 2022, well, will this include 24, 25? Does this budget include 24, 25, or is it just 23, 24? Because what I want to do is I want to find out the comparison in how many classroom teachers we had in 23, 24, and 22, 23, as well as aides. The CTE teachers, special aides, and special aides, that's all I want on. ESOL teachers, and also lab managers. And then if we go to the instructional support, I just want to know the difference in how many numbers we had and how many numbers we have for behavioral interventionists. Also on school administration, how many assistant principals we had and how many we have are we getting, as well as administrative assistants, how many we had and how many we have or are getting. Assistant directors, the same information. And then if we can go to new education funding model, state ed to classrooms, I'd like to know pre-career and CT. No, I don't need to know anything there. I think I've got that figured out. But what I do want to know is on how many pupils in poverty do we have? And also dual credit, dual enrollment, how many students we have in dual enrollment. And then also, Dr. Royster, when we talk about Langston Charter Middle Schools and they've moved, so we're not going to have that 3 million, whatever it is. Overbrook Child Early College Program has moved to Southside, Berea, et cetera. So those expenditures that we no longer have, we're saying those went to those schools that they're going to. I'd like to know how many students we had in early college program and what schools those children are planning to go to.
Doing a presentation on that for the committee of the whole next Tuesday.
Okay, good.
The amounts you're referring to, those amounts are being removed from our budget.
And
Langston leaves. So that amount is the amount we had to send to them when they were part of the district. Overbrook is closing the building. We're closing the building. We're sending the 4 classes to other locations.
Okay.
That's the amount of savings related to closing the building. The third one, we're shutting down a separate location of early college. That's the amount of savings in not running it in that location. We are sending 2 teachers to each of those 3 high schools from the early college. That's the only early college personnel that remain in the budget. And in that presentation on Tuesday, you will see the number of students that are signed up already to enter early college programming in the 3 high schools.
So I appreciate that information and I look forward to that presentation. I do understand where Mrs. Doolin is coming from. And, you know, I didn't really look at that, but I would wonder, I know that there are buffers in this budget in case of emergencies. It's just, I don't know how much buffers we have. And so I do understand that. But that's all I have. Thank you so much.
To your last point, Ms. Levinus Wells, the best way to look at those buffers is when we return to a regular budget year. Do we end the year at 98, 99%? Or do we end the year at some significant amount beyond that for which there's not a reasonable explanation that could not be forecasted?
Okay, and one more question. When we talk about athletic directors, do they have assistants or are they just a one person?
They have a supplement for an assistant who does not necessarily have any release time.
Because I'll just speak to that at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leventis Wells. Last call for questions. If there are no other questions, Dr. Royster, I have one brief question. First off, I want to say thank you once again to everyone involved, and I think this is a very thorough budget, and I appreciate it. I think it's very conservative. One of the things that I was really pleased to see in the budget was the bus driver compensation and years of experience, how you're developing a salary scale that's going to recruit, hire, and retain bus drivers. I think that's wonderful. But I'm also, like Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell and Ms. Morrison-Fair, thinking about our food service staff and our custodial staff. Everyone aspires to reach a higher level. And as someone spends a lot of years in our district, they also seek to retire and they want to build their salary for that purpose. And I'm just wondering, has there been any thought, or will there be any thought into the future into doing something similar for our food service and our custodial staff members?
Well, the custodial staff, most of them are affected by that move to 1608. Same is true of our food service operators, which is the lowest paid level of employee in food service. So it does address those. What we've tried to do, because of being aware of the limited resources that we have, is to try to get everybody up to really a living wage in the economy in which we live in Greenville County. So that means moving our lowest wage earners up more so than we move others. Everybody's going to move, assuming the budget's approved, everybody would move 3.5%. These people are moving considerably more than 3.5 because $1.02 an hour on 1502 is a pretty good increase. Still not getting to where exactly we want to be. We looked at, one of the things that we looked at before we made this recommendation was moving this further up the schedule. But that generated in our minds more cost than we felt comfortable recommending, because that would have been directly tied to a larger tax increase.
I understand that everyone is moving, and I'm very happy about that. And I'm not sure how we could incentivize that, but just maybe if you get to a certain number of years or something, there's some kind of incentive to stay. I think that those areas could use some incentivizing. I know they're getting increases like everyone else, and they're building, but something that keeps them going, and they know they get to a certain point, like the 5-year bar or the 10-year bar, that there's some kind of financial incentive that just continues to draw them to allow them to stay and to help to build their retirement. That's more in line with what I was thinking.
So I think what you're asking about, suggesting, is what we've looked at for multiple of our jobs. The bus drivers are in a band now. So it's 0 to 4, 0 to 3, 4 plus. So we've looked at a lot of those other jobs that are on these 9, 13, and 14 steps to move them to either 2 bands or 3 bands, which, so if you're in this kind of the entry level first 3 or 4 years, they might vary based on the job. Then sort of the mid-range of your employment time, then sort of the upper end. So there's just 3 places to go. So you'd move from one group to the next, like the bus drivers are doing right now. When they go to year 4, they're moving up into that other group. But every year, both groups gets a cost of living applied to the wage for that group. So that seems to be tracking with what you're asking about,
Yes.
or what you're suggesting.
That's exactly what I'm asking that we consider for the future, something similar for our food service and our custodial staff. I know that's in the future, not this year, but I would like to I think those are employees that I would like to continue to see us focus on building their salaries.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. With that said, that will end our questioning and discussion phase. Before we move to take a motion to conclude the meeting, I'd just like to tell Mrs. Bush on behalf of the board that we're wishing you the best on your upcoming surgery. She may miss a few meetings with us, and we'll certainly miss having you here. You're a bright spot, Ms. Bush. But we hope your surgery goes well, and we hope that you have a very speedy recovery, and you will be in our thoughts and prayers. Being that there's no other discussion or questions on the budget, I need a motion to adjourn. Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Mrs. Bush has made a motion. Ms. Morrison Fair has made a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That concludes our meeting. Thank you for coming, and thank you again to all of our district staff members. Have a great rest of your day.